Hi there, I am Sarah Jane Case, and I'm the host of your new favorite show, Enneagram and Coffee. This podcast is dedicated to discussing the beautiful and hard parts of being human. We discuss the Enneagram, a personality map that is taking over the world, for increased self-compassion, personal growth, and healthier relationships. Listen to Enneagram and Coffee on the iHeart app or wherever you get your podcasts.
Welcome to BookTok for BookTok, a literary podcast where we deep dive into the writings of your favorite novels. This summer, we are hosting our Romantasy Edition of a book club while we prepare for a 15-part literary analysis of Sarah J. Maas's House of Sky and Breath. This is Jack.
And I'm Amy, and each week we'll discuss one book from our Summer Book Club roster. By using our literary background, we'll provide our first blush analysis of each book as well as discuss listener thoughts.
This week, we'll be discussing Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yarros. The views expressed by the hosts are entirely their own and in no way represent the thoughts or intentions of the original author.
This podcast is a discussion shared to spark thought and conversation on the characters and themes of this novel.
The interpretations presented in this podcast are just a few of the many possibilities. Listeners are encouraged to read along and share their own analysis of the text.
Though the hosts speak mostly within the constraints of this book, series and extended universe spoilers may be discussed with or without warning.
Explicit language as well as themes of sex, violence, abuse, depression, self-harm, and death will recur throughout this podcast. Listener discretion is advised.
We have done an episode about Iron Flame, but this is the first time we are recording Fourth Wing thoughts for the podcast.
And we did reread these. And
We did.
the first time I listened to this book last summer when everyone was all excited about it, I listened to it. And then this time I decided to read it because I have a friend who said it was an entirely different experience. So I was up till 2 a.m. last night trying to read my little heart out, and 2 a.m. the night before. I was like, go read. I forgot how big it is. It was
sorry.
No, I did this to me. We pushed this recording date a couple times for me, so this is fine. I have so many emotions. I need to figure out how I'm going to cope.
I am curious. So do you feel like it was distinctly different reading versus listening?
Yes. And no. So I think with this one, I can better understand which moments were Violet's thoughts versus what she's actually saying. I know, I feel like I heard that the narrator redid the book because she was sick when she did it the first time.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I remember the first time I listened to it, I was like, she obviously has a cold and it is fucking annoying.
I actually was really into it because I got this idea of a little Violet Sorrengail, kind of a little nasally, and that made sense to me.
Yeah. Well, I re-listened to it for the second time, and it was a much better experience.
That's probably why.
Yeah, to be honest. So I don't think you answered the question, though. So what was different reading versus listening?
You know what? I think the first thing we must address is that I'm different now. So I'm a different person.
You are a different person.
You know, I think having Violet's inner monologue versus understanding what she's saying, she's a lot drier, a lot funnier in person, but I'm all like in her own thought process, like you don't realize how much she's not speaking versus how much of it is her actually speaking, because there'll be a lot of times that she's responding to people and there's no I thought or italics. It's just what it says, but it flows into the conversation that I can't remember if the first time when the narrator did it, it was like it blended. It sounded like she was just saying all these things. Now there was I'm able to distinguish the two. I feel like it was really hard for me to read it and not think about book 2 the whole time. Oh, I'll just say the warning here. Book 2 spoilers. There is no world where we're not mentioning book 2. We are here to analyze book 1, but it was hard for me not to think about book 2.
Right. I mean, you have to think about Iron Flame because the whole time And I did it too while I was listening to the book because I was like, "Oh, there's a lot of groundwork that's being done
Yeah.
for Iron Flame." And even the twists at the end of Fourth Wing throughout the entirety of Fourth Wing.
Yeah. I mean, there were some things that happened that we didn't get in Fourth Wing where I was like, "Oh, was that did we not find out until book 2? It's so obvious
Mhm.
that the scars on his
Yeah.
back were because of her mom." Like, what? Did we not get that?
Yeah.
I think also for me, I walked away from Iron Flame having a hard time supporting the book, supporting
Mhm.
Violet, supporting Rebecca as an author. Like, there were so many things with that book. I mean, people, please go back and listen to our analysis of it. But, quick recap, there were so many things from Iron Flame that just was not executed well, in our opinion,
Mhm.
including Violet's character, including the story and everything, that it was both jarring, refreshing, and kind of made me sad reading the first one with how tight and how good the first one is.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, there's a reason why Fourth Wing did so well.
Yeah.
It was pretty well executed, all things considered. And so, I think in our original analysis, discussion of Iron Flame, we talked about how rushed it felt
Yeah.
and how she was riding the high of the success. And
Mhm.
I'm sure there was a lot of pressure from the publisher as well.
Mhm.
Nevertheless, it had consequences for the book.
Yeah.
And I agree. It is hard to think about Iron Flame and not be sad because Fourth Wing was a fun ride consistently.
Yeah. And because I know what kind of character Violet turns out in Iron Flame, not that she turns evil or anything, but just like her decisions are so annoying that it was like, I'm trying to give Violet 1.0 a chance here, like I'm trying to be like,
Yeah.
okay, you're innocent. And I do like Violet so much more in the first book. Before we get into it, I could not find an article. And I want to say when Fourth Wing first came out, there was a couple articles written about how studios came to Rebecca Yarros, came to authors with an
Mm,
idea, and I don't know how much of it was just like, "Hey, we want a fantasy romantasy book with dragons." I don't know if it was that.
mhm.
I don't know if they came to her saying, "Here are the elements you have to execute." I don't know what was hers and what was not, but I know that it was decided to be a book that was going to be adapted into a TV series. Then
Yeah.
you can tell how it was broken up so well. Like, it's
Yeah.
broken up in a way that, screen, like book to screen, makes total sense. I can't
Yeah.
find anything now saying that.
Hmm. Interesting.
Yeah.
I wonder if that's partially because of reactions to Iron Flame.
Mhm.
I wonder if because of the strikes, everything slowed down.
Yeah.
And so, maybe that idea is scrapped. I think when we first talked about it, you said it was Amazon,
Yeah,
but
it
I
was.
could be
I know
wrong.
Amazon got the rights to it. I don't know if they're the ones who I wanna say that they're the ones who initially sent it. Like, they were in October of last year, it was announced that it was going to go ahead and be adapted,
Mhm.
but from my if memory serves right, it was something that we knew that it was something that had been discussed the year prior even. Like, it was a deal that was
Mm,
announced in October, but was signed before Fourth Wing was even published.
interesting,
Mhm.
interesting. I do remember you telling me that, but I never saw any of the articles. So, I have
I
to
know our
trust
friends
your
read it. I
memory.
know they did too. It wasn't just me. But I think the reason why it's important that I bring that up is because Fourth Wing, it's a very tight book. There's what people may like or may not like. At the end of the day, it is a well-paced, interesting world, well-written book.
Mhm. Yeah.
Very thought out.
Yeah, and people are suckers for competitions,
Yeah.
school stories,
Mhm.
enemies to lovers. I mean, is it enemies to lovers? Did she stab him to begin with?
So am I the official deciding
Yeah.
factor? You know what? I'm
Yes.
happy we talked about this. You know what? It was never enemies to lovers. It was, should we be enemies to lovers?
Yeah,
It was
yep, yep, yep.
eh to lovers.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Because even Zayden at the end, when we're in like his point of view, he says like it was attraction at first sight. I'm like, all right, well, that's not an enemy
Mhm.
because
Yeah,
you know
yeah.
you guys were horny at first sight.
They were enemies when they were just an idea in each other's brains.
Yeah, they were idea enemies to lovers.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, as the official holder of enemies to lovers, does not get my stamp of enemies to lovers approval. I still appreciate it. I mean, and I think like half the reason why it's so good is the love story in this. But
Yeah.
before going into it, what was your first blush? Like, you haven't read this in a year. There's, time has changed. We have changed. Like, what was your thoughts listening to it again for the second time?
It was easier to pay attention this time
Mm-hmm.
listening to it because the narrator was not sick.
Yeah.
There were parts that I definitely remember not remembering or definitely tuning out
Yeah.
that I paid more attention to this time, which was extremely helpful for the story. I was
Woo!
like, oh, wow, amazing how that works. Specifically, the scene where Violet goes to pick a flower for poison
Mm-hmm.
in a tree, and then she oversees all the relic holders, all the children
Oh,
of
yeah, yeah.
the
The rebellion
rebellion.
children.
Yeah.
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 Did you tune that out the first time?
Yeah.
That's
I was like, how did she get in this tree? I don't understand how she got here. I just completely
Wait a
tuned it
minute.
out.
What, is she outside now? What happened? Does she have a dragon? When did the dragon come in?
The problem is if I try to multitask too hard while I listen to audiobooks,
And you are the queen of
I
like multitasking with an audiobook. Like you
yeah.
you go so hard.
I do.
Does it stick?
Yeah, I might have been working.
Yeah.
That might have been the problem,
Yeah.
to be honest.
It wasn't multitasking, it was just noise in the background.
Exactly. It was white noise.
Yeah.
So this time around, like being serious, I definitely picked up more clues
Mhm.
and I had more respect for the narrative because I could see what it was doing.
Yeah.
Knowing what happens at the end of Fourth Wing, knowing what happens in Iron Flame, I was like, oh, this was thought out. This was
Mhm.
all very intentional. And that gave me more respect
Yeah.
for it. I can see how, based on what you were saying, Jack, reading would be a different experience even more so because it is very difficult to draw the line between what is Violet thinking
Mhm.
versus what is she saying. And sometimes I think I know what it is, but I suspect it's actually a lot more thinking than I realize.
A lot more thinking. She does not talk much.
So, which is shocking because she seems like this chatty Cathy, to be
Mhm.
honest. I think I will have to next time I decide to pursue this book. I'm going to have to read it rather than listen to it.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely like her conversation grew. By the end of the book, she was
Mhm.
much more comfortable talking, and that's just like an interesting character development thing too that I didn't pick up the first time, where it's like, oh,
Yeah.
she was actually a lot more quiet. She didn't really say anything. She was off there poisoning people left and right. And then now by the end of the book, she's, flipping Xaden off and isn't afraid to say screw you to whoever. So there's a really good progression there.
Yeah, that's really, really interesting because that changes her character at the start fundamentally in my brain.
Yeah.
Like, oh, she's a true, almost introvert
Mm-hmm.
in a way I didn't realize,
Yeah.
if that's the case.
And I don't know. And that's the thing where it's like, is she an introvert or is she observant? Because I didn't get an introvert vibe from her. I think that we start off very strong with like who she is with her mom and stuff, but like I think she's definitely I would classify it as much more reserved, a lot more
Yeah,
observing.
I used introvert incorrectly.
That's
I
okay.
mean reserved.
Yes. Then she is absolutely way more reserved in the beginning and
Mm-hmm.
just like watching, and then versus the end, she's much more action and go forward. So her
Mm-hmm.
arc, being able to read it, is a lot more clear of who she is.
And that makes sense if she was trained as a scribe her entire
Mhm.
life. And then she uncovers this like element of the writer within her.
Yeah.
That shift makes a lot of sense and is more obvious to me, other than her being like, I don't want to be here. I'm going to die because I'm weak.
Yeah. Wait, I want to die. Crybaby, get over it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and especially I think it was a little bit easier for me to grapple with the idea of her going from "I don't wanna be here" to "I really am a writer," because that's
Mhm.
a big feat that Yarros has to do, where we
Yeah.
go from Violet not wanting to be there, but
Mhm.
also being pushover, docile enough to say, like, or bulldozed enough by her mom saying, "Well, this is it, I'm here." But, like, what are those elements that keep her there? What are those things that make her go because it's almost like she's lying to herself at the beginning then,
Mm.
because
Mhm.
she could have gone against her mother. She could have gone off with Dane initially, but, like, she did say no from the get-go, and there was always a side of her, as we find out later, that she wanted to know if she could be a writer, but her dad said no. So there's
Yeah.
like elements there that we start to unravel, and we see that she's actually a lot stronger, a lot more, God, I hate to say it, violent and then she expected. World's worst nickname.
Violence.
You can tell, they both thought Rebecca and Zayden both thought they were clever with that one. And maybe it is. And maybe it's just because I've seen so many people making fun of it that that's now my perception. But no, even the first time it made me cringe.
Well, I don't know that I ever really cared. I At first it's mocking and then it becomes reality,
Mhm.
right? She grows into it. So I can see why it might come across as clever.
It reads better than it sounds.
That's fair.
Like reading it, yes.
Saying it out loud.
Look out, violence. Like, hey, watch out, violence. It's
Jack is gagging, if you can't tell.
yeah. Violet was, I mean, like, let's just go on this Violet train. Her as a character is such a interesting character to me because I have such mixed emotions. Like, I don't know where I stand with her. I like her, but I don't advocate for her.
She comes across as very, very young.
Yeah.
She comes across as one of my younger sisters.
Mhm.
She thinks she knows what she wants, but she doesn't really understand what
Yeah.
that is.
Yeah.
And no offense to my sisters, love them, but they are young. They are in their early 20s.
Yeah.
A- And I think this is true to her character. She has been brought up with a certain expectation for her life
Mhm.
and understands that that's how it's going to be. So when it flips its head on her,
Yeah.
she doesn't know what to do.
Mhm.
And so I think she approaches her relationships the same. Of like, this is what I think I want my relationships to look like. This is what I've decided that's how it's going to be.
Yeah.
And none of them go that way.
Yeah.
Dane doesn't go that way, Zayden doesn't go that way, and how she treats her friends doesn't go the way that she thinks is right and proper.
Mhm.
And she's just not experienced enough to really sort it out for herself. And the stress around her also prevents her from taking the time to figure that out.
Yeah. And that's what was, like, hard for me is because like, book 1, I do like her, and that's the thing where it's like there's things about her that, yes, she's young, but she pushes through, she's not a pick me, she's not like, "I'm just one of the guys," like,
Mm,
she's horny, but, who among us isn't? So,
right.
like, especially if you have, like, hot guys that are just wrestling each other, don't blame her.
Yeah.
Like, there's nothing specifically there that drives me up the wall, and the only thing
Hmm.
I could think about the entire time was, like, what she does in book 2 that just makes me mad, so I'm kind of, like, mad that, like, book 2 didn't taint it, but just kind of, like, there's a taste in my mouth that just I can't get rid of, and I can't identify it with.
I have not reread Iron Flame,
Same.
and I think Iron Flame needs to be reread
Mm,
to see if, having reread Fourth Wing,
yeah.
we feel the same about Iron Flame. I suspect, because I don't really like Violet, I'm not really Team Violet.
That's, like, I don't like her, but I don't dislike her. I don't know what I feel about her.
Yeah, and I think that the situations in Iron Flame bring out the worst in her. I
Yeah.
think it was all there to begin with. And I think we see it. We see hints of it in this book. So I'm not necessarily, I don't know that I'm on board with the thought train that Rebecca Yarros did Violet dirty. I think Violet is
Dirty
just
to begin with.
dirty to begin
And
with.
that might make sense. Maybe that's what I'm picking up here, where it's like, you kinda suck, and
Yeah.
again, like, there's okay, like, I was about to be like, "I can't analyze it." Well, that's literally what we're here to do. Like, I mean, especially when you get into the end with her trying to understand her relationship with Xaden.
Mhm.
Girl, I need you to make more sense. I need you to I need to, make this more like, make this make sense. You're also withholding
Yeah.
sex, and you're not willing to have a conversation, but you're trying to be a grown up about this, and granted, you're a 20-year-old, what do you know? Like, you're a child, but
Right. I mean, and it's not like we don't know for a fact that her parents modeled good communication.
yeah.
Her mother, I mean, she obviously has trauma with her mother's, and her brother died and her sister's not around. So it's not like she has anyone in her life she can go to and be like, how do I make this relationship work? How do I have a healthy relationship?
Mhm.
I just don't think she's set up for success. And I think she's perpetually been set up for failure. And
Mhm.
the fact that she's succeeded in the writer's quadrant is just like pure luck
Yeah.
and because of those dragons.
Yes.
If Andorna and Taryn had not come for her, she would have died a long time ago
Yep.
because nothing about her is meant to succeed.
Truly. Okay. I had a realization.
Yeah.
I'm gonna backtrack a little bit, or
Okay.
not even backtrack, jump to a different track. So this is Yaros's first fantasy novel.
Mhm.
She's a romance author. Focusizing? Focusing. I know.
Wow.
Something else went out there. Analyzing, focusing, that's what I was trying to do a combo. Focusing on uh military romance.
Mhm.
So all of her books before were very military based, which makes sense with where they're based out of, but they're romance books. Now,
Mhm.
during my master's, my dissertation was on the gender politics of vampirism, and I went into romance genre as a whole because there's a lot of like parallels there.
Yeah.
What's interesting about the romance genre, especially kind of more earlier romances, I would even say, let's just say prior to 2015 romances, the characters are really nondescript. Like, you don't have a lot of
Mhm.
descriptions about them because they're meant for you to put your feet, like, for you to be there. That's why when you
Yeah.
read Twilight, I'll use that as an example. Bella is described as brown hair, brown eyes. Like, you really cannot get
Yeah.
more. It's just a vague person, and all we have, and that was like when I was waiting for Violet, all we have is small, silver hair,
Mhm.
brunette to silver hair. I can't tell you I can't remember what her eye colors are, or what is she considered beautiful? Is she considered
Mhm.
ugly? Does she have like, she kind of has this like confident attitude where she knows that she's attractive, but is she? Like, there's just too
Yeah.
much about her that we don't know.
Yeah. No, I think that's a great point. And to clarify, with examples like Bella from Twilight, it's you're supposed to see yourself in that character,
Yes.
or you're
Yeah.
supposed to visualize yourself as that character.
Mhm.
And I very much agree that for Violet, I don't know what she looks like. I just replaced her with someone who sounds like they have the same body shape, really.
And I think it's hard for me when I have a vague character. When I've seen the fan art, she's beautiful. She's, kind of almost has this adolescent childlike, and it's hard not to infantize her because she's so
Yeah.
weak and she's so small, right?
Mhm.
But I need to know, like, what, like, is she, it would do a lot for me if she sees herself as a beauty, if she sees herself as, yeah, average, can get by, or if she doesn't
Yeah.
see much of herself at all. You know what I mean? Because
Yeah.
and I don't want it to come off as conceited, because otherwise it changes, each one changes of what she's like, because early on she's flirting with Dane.
Yeah.
What are you doing flirting with Dane? Like, she kind of has this like brazen attitude with him that she says that she's never really had before, and I'm like, well,
Yeah.
what happened? Did you get boobs over the summer? Like, what happened in this one year that you didn't see him? Like,
Yeah.
what's this thing
Yeah.
that suddenly gives you confidence? And it helps me decide more about her and where she's at.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And to be honest, if we think about the narrative, I don't think Yara spends time really describing anybody beyond the color of their hair or the texture of their hair other than
Xaden,
Xaden.
yeah.
I think Xaden is the only character she spends time truly describing.
Yeah. I mean,
I
we know Imogen has pink short hair, shaved one side.
Right. We know Dane has reddish brown hair.
That's
We know
Sawyer.
Liam
Liam's
is
blonde.
blonde.
We know
Rhiannon
Rhiannon's
has
black.
curly black hair.
Rhiannon's black too, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I that's my assumption based on the
Fan art.
description of the hair.
Based off of the fan art, to be honest, yeah. I mean, and Xaden, we know he has tawny skin, and I had to Google, I'm like, "The fuck is tawny?" Like, I was like, "I need you to give me more here, Yarros," like, what? And that's
Yeah,
like
well, and he's sculpted.
he has a scar here. Oh, yeah, we know every little
Yeah.
ridge, every little bump of him. I know his
We
nose
know
has a
how many
little
we know how many muscles in his
like,
pectorals.
I could tell you everything about his face, like, what do you wanna know? I got it all, but it's but at the same time, I'm like, I cannot describe anyone else, and, like, okay, sure, like, you're the co-stars, but, like, the co-characters, the other characters, she may not be as absorbed in them as not. Like, Liam, we do get a little bit more description just to describe of, like, how attractive he is, but
Yeah,
even then, it's still pretty vague, but I
yeah.
just need to know the mindset that Violet is, because she never once doubts that she could get with Xaden. Not
Mm,
once does she think, and I don't need her to self-doubt. I don't need her to look at him and say, "I'm not pretty enough." Like, I'm okay with that. I
mhm,
experience that in my head enough. I don't need my characters to think that either.
right.
But then you're telling me that this person is going into this school who has a certain level of self-confidence.
Yeah,
Now that's going to be a different thing. Like, I know she's confident in her school ability, but if you're telling me she's confident in her intelligence, she's confident in her humor and her personality and in her looks and all these other things,
yeah.
well, then it makes sense that she's, got that writer material.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that just came to my mind is maybe the unspoken thing is scribes wear robes and everything is covered, and maybe she's used to not being seen, and so maybe that would make her more self-conscious, or maybe she's just like, it's never been a thought because it's never been a judgment either.
Maybe. I mean, I'm just gonna go back to the way that when she sees Dane for the first time in over a year, and she's just flat out flirting with him, she's like, "Are you
Yeah,
asking how many
that's fair.
partners I have, Dane?" Like,
Yeah,
she is a saucy with him to the point where I'm like,
yeah,
if you've never done this in your life, if this is not your sense of humor, if your sense of humor is not to, like, randomly hit on people,
yeah,
then, like, this is very shocking and jarring. Like, that
yeah,
was one of my initial thoughts when I read it the first time. When I read it the second time, was like, this is supposed to be your best friend that you've been lusting after, and you are making these types
yeah.
of comments to him, and you're doing it in a kind of saucy, sexy way, then
Yeah, and you've never made the move on him before?
yeah.
Yeah. No, it is a curious.
Curious. It's a little curious,
Curious.
that we might say. Yeah.
Fall has officially started here in Los Angeles, and that means we finally get to do fall activities.
I have been counting down the days for when I can go to pumpkin patches, maybe even hit up an apple orchard, and I get to do all of it looking super cute in my Quince boyfriend sweater.
This weather is perfect for my dark academia vibes, and I'm so excited to bust out my washable silk blouse because I'm going to be taking pictures.
Quince is known for their Mongolian cashmere sweaters from $50. And that's not all. Quince has so many other amazing things on their website.
All of those items are priced 50 to 80% less than similar brands.
That includes leather jackets, cotton cardigans, soft denim. Like, my entire fall wardrobe is genuinely turning into Quince wardrobe.
By partnering directly with top factories and cutting out the cost of the middleman, we get savings as the customer.
One of my favorite parts about Quince is the fact that they only work with factories that use safe, ethical, and responsible manufacturing practices. And they still manage to get premium fabrics and finishes for that, luxury feeling for every item that they have.
Get cozy in Quince's high-quality wardrobe essentials. Go to quince.com/booktalk for free shipping on your order and 365-day returns. That's Quince, QUINCE.com/booktalk, BOOKTALK, to get free shipping and 365-day returns. That's quince.com/booktalk.
it's fine. I didn't realize how much I was like caught on the whole looks thing, but like the looks thing really does get me.
Mm-hmm.
She never once assumes anything about she could get with anyone or she could not get with anyone. And again,
Yeah.
I don't need every single one of my heroines to reflect the same issues that I have. That's
Yeah.
okay. Like, I mean, I love seeing it and I love when I don't see it, but like I need it addressed one way or another. So I think that's
Yeah.
my initial Violet analysis.
Yeah. One of our listeners about Violet
Mhm.
said they enjoyed her resourcefulness. She was working smarter, not harder.
Yeah.
Which is true.
Yep.
I like in that way I identified with her. I
Mhm.
identified with her smarts and her resourcefulness, and that sounded really conceited.
I just
But
really identified with like how pretty she was and how smart she was. Yeah. No,
and
it's
how manipulative she was.
I really relate to when she poisoned people.
But I mean, that's when I think of Violet, I think of her intelligence,
Yeah.
and maybe that was Yaros's point.
Yes.
But we know that, people are more than just what they think or what they do. People judge them by the way they look and how they act around those
Yeah.
around them.
Yeah, I loved her resourcefulness. I thought it was, as someone who would love to not work too hard and things and just kind of like I love technicalities. Like I love a
Yeah.
good old like, but technically
Yep.
rule. That's one of my biggest. I love that. So, like her after the gauntlet coming up and having the
Yep.
like technically this is a part of my person and therefore this that one I was like you and me Violet, we'll get
Yeah.
along
Yeah.
here.
Yeah. Yeah.
I definitely enjoyed that. I really liked her mantra of like I will not die today.
Mm-hmm.
Her humor was also really funny, like the way that she
Yeah.
was with her sister, like, "You're not an only child. Yay!"
Yay! Yeah. In that way, I definitely saw you.
Oh, thank you. That's
Yeah.
it's in the good moments.
In the good moments
Yeah.
only.
I think there was a couple other comments I saw, people saying that they liked her arc in book 1.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
which I think makes sense. I mean, now that I know more from the reading perspective,
Mhm.
I have a better appreciation for her arc, just knowing how much is internalized versus
Yeah.
externalized by the end.
Yeah, and, she found a community where she feels like she gets to say things, like
Yeah.
she felt like she wasn't able to she makes a comment that saying that she didn't even really get to spend time with her dad in the end. He was closed off and it was only because he was in with the scribes and she was with him trying to study with him that she was able to, spend time with him. So, and then you have her mom that she can't talk to and Brennan
Yeah.
and Mira are both like doing their own thing. So, like it's nice to see her find her community in a lot of ways. This
Yeah.
is also a chosen family story too.
Yeah. Yeah.
Except she hasn't chosen her family yet.
Not yet. Mostly it's about she's chosen a dick and that's what she's focused
It's a
on.
chosen dick story, and, it's a tale as old as time. Okay, take a sip, take
And
a sip.
then they think
Stay
they're
hydrated.
enemies to lovers.
It's just like we're angst enemies to lovers, like
Yeah, yeah.
like angst to lovers is
Okay.
all it was.
Oh, no.
The
You're
angst
supposed to
was
also
God, the angst was top tier when it comes to their love story. I'm a
Don't
fan
cut
of
me
that.
off from my sipping in this
Sorry.
novel.
I'm
You
sorry.
would not say
I
the
would
same
never.
if
How
I
dare
were
you?
playing.
I'll
Describes
sip
my
in
iron
penance.
flame.
It describes my feelings about their relationship and Iron Flame rage. Okay, so the next comment, we have a couple of comments, so I'm gonna kind of bring them all together. The theme is dragons. I love the dragons. They were the thing that kept me going. Love the dragon banter. Taryn and Adrana, when they first chose Violet as a writer.
Tarn and Andorna.
Darna.
Tarn and Andorna.
You know what? I'm leaving this all in because I don't want anyone to believe that I can remember that.
Okay.
I'm consistent.
You are consistent. You do not discriminate with your bad pronunciation.
Tarn and Adarna.
Andorna.
Okay.
Good job.
I want you to know
You got
this
it.
person did a typo. I was reading off of them.
Blame the other person. Okay.
Always. I will always find someone else to blame. That's my guarantee to you. But yeah, I think let's talk dragons. Let's love the dragons' personalities.
I do too. I agree that Tairn especially keeps me going
Yeah.
in Fourth Wing, especially the first time I listened to it. And I will say the narrator of the audiobook did a good job
Mhm.
it being Tairn, and it was enjoyable and it was snarky
Yeah.
and just my level of snark. I really enjoyed it. I have to say, going back to the conversation about what does Violet even look like, I have a better time visualizing the majority of those dragons than I
Yeah.
do the people in this book.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just putting that out there.
You're not wrong.
So yeah, I don't know what else to say. I like the relationship between Taryn and Violet.
Mhm.
I like the relationship between Taryn and Sigale
Yeah.
and the complication of that. I think that's very fun
Mhm.
because I think for me what it was the fact that the mate trope is not about Violet having a mate, right?
Not yet.
It's about it's about the dragons having
Not
mates.
yet. I don't think we are too far off from a mate discovery.
It's not part of the lore,
Not
at
yet.
least.
Yeah.
Not at
At
this
this moment,
moment,
it's not part of the lore.
and I appreciate
Yes,
that.
no, you're right. You are absolutely right.
That's what I got.
I do worry after reading this book. I'm like, "Oh, you're gonna bust out a fated situation here
Oh, there's probably some sort of prophecy,
with
yeah.
Xaden and
Yeah,
and Violet." Like there
yeah.
it's just so like aggressive spark together situation that
Mhm.
there's no way that this isn't going to be like and when the two worlds collide to screw, everyone will be saved. Like, you know what I mean? Ancient prophecy, as they say. um, but yeah, okay. So Taryn,
Tarn.
Taryn,
Tarn.
Taryn loved him. I think the audiobook does him justice more than my brain. And I think
Fair.
it's like the audiobook narrator, I remember she did a really good job with him and how
Yeah,
snarky and like,
yeah.
curmudgeon that he is, and
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
and Darna,
Mhm.
I think that
Good
like
job.
she's so sweet and innocent, and the
Mhm.
whole conversation that they're all in each other's minds, and how much that Violet can't keep him out and he can't really keep her out, or just like God, the all-time favorite line when the professor's trying to get Violet to get her lightning going, and he's like, "Well, what emotions were you feeling when you got their lightning going?" And Taryn is like, "Would you like me to call the wing leader?" Like, that was funny. Like, those were
Yeah, yeah,
really
yeah, yeah.
funny moments. And
Yeah,
I really enjoyed that. I also enjoy like the emotional connection that Violet has with both of them.
yeah.
There's one where Taryn is a partner that she
Mhm.
doesn't have anywhere else. She doesn't have that with Xaden. She doesn't have that
Yeah.
with her own family, but like that is a true partner. And she forgives him with the
Mhm.
whole betrayal thing way more than Xaden. And I think
Yeah,
that's because she I don't want to say she sees him as an equal to her, but like they're connected in that really intense way that she can feel his guilt and his like, like I wanted to tell you versus like giving Xaden more crap. Uh, what was really interesting reading this time was just how connected Violet is to Andarna.
yeah,
That I didn't appreciate just how much she has that, like, really soft spot for her, and
yeah,
knowing
yeah.
that Andarna was waiting for 600 years or however long it's been, that there's, like, we got a prophecy coming, and
Mhm,
it's, like,
mhm.
gonna have to do with Violet. Like, there was that scene where where Violet realizes that Mira was alive after the attack, and she goes out to
Yeah,
the field and just cries to Andarna.
yeah, yeah.
And I was really struck by their relationship, and I can appreciate it so much more now.
Yeah, I definitely also caught on to that more the second time
Mhm.
than I did the first time. It is an interesting choice because in some ways it is the younger sister, the daughter. the soul connection that she never got with her
Mhm.
mother or with her sister. And so it is interesting to see that relationship displaced onto a baby dragon.
Interesting that that's your view on it.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think if Mira had been younger in age and, hadn't gone to be a dragon rider, I bet she could have had that with Mira.
You
I bet
view
she
it more as, like, an equal, because that's almost because
N
you know
no, not necessarily. It's a cross between an equal and a parental child
yeah,
figure.
because
Like
Violet is more parental towards
right.
Andarna, yeah.
Right, and so I see it as a little bit of both.
Mhm.
I see her viewing herself as a maternal figure
Yeah,
to Andarna,
yeah,
but some of the reliance of, like, she goes and cries to
yep,
Andarna, some
yep,
of the burden sharing is more sibling-like than it is paternal
interesting.
to yeah.
It felt to me when I was reading it, it felt like a almost, and I'm gonna say it and I'm gonna regret it, because I can't justify it, but it felt like a reflection of herself in many ways,
Mm,
where
yeah,
it was almost like if Taryn is the personality that she can kind of play off of and,
mhm,
kind of gripe to, and to me, they're like 2 very distinct personalities that she can, like, bounce off of. And Darna is like the reflection of her soul.
yeah. I completely agree with what you're saying, that Andarna is kind of that inner soul,
Mhm.
whereas Tyrn is the outer crust
Yeah,
of who Violet is,
yeah,
which, if we think about it in the context of Iron Flame, what happens to Andarna? Who is Andarna? She's a petulant teenager
yeah.
at that point. Who else is acting a little bit like a petulant teenager?
Like Violet,
Like
boom. And
Violet.
Violet is new and naive to this world. She's a
Mhm.
newborn in her own, and not a newborn, just like a toddler where she's just kind of like stumbling around figuring out this
Yeah.
world. Yeah.
Yeah. So I could
Mm,
see how Endorna is a metaphor
yeah.
for Violet and her growth in each novel.
Yeah. Hopefully that means she'll pull her shit together for book 3.
Fingers crossed.
I can't do this again. Like
Yeah, I mean, and there's gonna be 2 more books at least, like, book 3 better be good.
book 3 Book 3 is where the character development should have a peak and come to a conclusion, essentially. Book 4 is when all the plot resolution is going to happen. That is the only
Mm.
way I will allow this.
Look, I actually didn't have a problem with the story of Iron Flame. It was Violet's inner monologue that I couldn't handle.
False. We had a little bit of a problem with the story.
I mean, I barely remember it, so what am I saying?
We it was the first half was like at the school and her being kidnapped and being
Right,
held
I
hostage, and then the
remember.
other half was like I'm over here. Now we're it was like 2 books that they kind of shoved into one.
Right,
Yeah.
I
Okay.
remember, but other than, that choice,
Yeah. No, you're right, like,
I
the story itself wasn't awful. Violet
right,
was.
Violet was.
So horrible.
Well, and Xaden was did his own to contribute to the
And
awfulness.
Dane I mean, actually, Dane wasn't innocent in that book.
Was he?
In book 2,
Was
yeah.
he?
He's groveling. Here is another listener thought. I liked that we got the world building from Violet on the parapet rather than normal exposition page. I thought it was a nice touch to add to the inciting incident of the book. I also like that the book starts with the inciting incident rather than lead into with a couple of chapters.
That's a fair
Mhm.
point. Narratively, I can see what Terry's saying because you want to have a reason to go to chapter 2,
Mhm.
and being on the parapet is a great reason to keep reading.
Yeah.
I understand at the same time narratively that sometimes authors want to set the status quo so that the inciting incident can disrupt the status quo.
Mhm.
I did that in my own fantasy novel. So I get it on both sides.
I want to talk about the first chapter because the first chapter is really long.
Mhm.
It's a very long first chapter. I'm looking at my at the Kindle app here, and it does so much in there. And I do love the, like, we are going right into it. This is immediately happening. I mean, we get a you're being thrown into military school. You
Yep.
careful, you need to survive. Okay, now whatever you do, avoid Zayden. Oh shit, he's hot. I can't
Yeah.
avoid him. And then Dylan, who we just made became friends with, now died. Like,
Yeah.
all
Yeah.
that
Yeah. Yeah.
happened in the first chapter.
Yeah. And I mean, it's very emblematic of the entire
Yeah,
book,
it's
which
it's great.
it does a great job. Yeah.
Yeah, it sets the pace because I feel like the pace of the book is really well done. I think that, I mean, this to me goes into, I feel like you can tell how much editorial developmental editing went into book 1.
Hmm.
This book was created to be a TV series, and you can really tell that. That is a first episode if I've ever seen one, you know what I mean? Like,
Yep.
that is
Yep.
you just did a lot of work, and now here we are, cutscene, opening credits, here goes everything, like,
Yeah.
we're there. But I think that when I was reading it, I do like the idea of, like, you're jumping into action and not taking
Hmm.
time to necessarily build up. You compare this to ACOTAR, that is another very well, tightly written first chapter. A lot of people thought it was boring, you know?
Yeah.
Like, this is what you get when you go into something really fast. We've dived right into it. We're not wasting time. For me, that was like a writing choice I really like and resonate with.
Yeah.
Now, going into the monologue of, here's the entire world building that Violet does while she's out in the parapet, that's a choice. I know it's very divided. I know some people really liked it. I know some people really didn't like it. And I do know that Rebecca did it on purpose because she wanted this book to be made for people who aren't used to reading fantasy necessarily.
Yeah. She achieved her goal,
Yeah.
if that is her goal, right?
Yeah.
Because the ups and downs are so frequent and unexpected.
Mhm.
Just when you think you're like, I think I can put this down, it grabs you again. You're
Yeah.
like, wait, that person just died or that just happened. She did it well,
Yep.
and I admire that.
Mhm.
It is hard to be committed to that type of storytelling because, and I can say this as an author myself, you get attached to your characters. You don't want them to die all the time.
Yeah.
And it's hard to create a setting where these types of things, death, poisoning, fire breathing dragons that will incinerate anybody
Mhm.
at any time. It's hard to create a setting like that on a regular basis for contemporary novels.
Oh, yeah, and I think what also makes it hard are those quiet moments, though, because we started
Yeah.
off with a bang, right? We start off
Yeah.
with all of this adrenaline in the character, in us, and then, she goes across the parapet. She almost, Jack Barlow almost kills her. She almost stabs him in the balls. Like, there's
Yeah.
so much that's happening that when you have the quiet moments of Violet sneaking up to get the flower in the tree,
You tune it out.
you might tune it out, and so
Yeah.
it means that Yarros has to work harder during
Yeah.
quiet moments.
Yep.
Because
Yep.
if there's anything that I think that she's done to prove herself as a writer, is that her action sequence is very well
Yeah.
done. Her
Yeah.
at stakes is very well done.
Yeah.
Being able to hold our attention when none of that is happening, that's where the difficulty comes in.
Yeah. It makes me want to. I'm going to come back to Terry's comment, but it makes me want to read another comment by
Oh,
one
yeah.
of our listeners that I think is relevant at this
Yeah,
moment.
yeah.
Jack has said a lot how good the pacing is, but a number of our listeners, when asked what they didn't like,
Mm,
the pacing was something they didn't like. And I think it's to what you're saying. It's fast and slow,
yeah.
and it's hard to stay committed to the story when it's slow because it is questionable. Is Yaros doing the work to keep me captivated during the slow times?
Mhm.
I don't know that that is necessarily happening when she's doing her chores or in class or talking to her friends without risk of death
Yeah.
or, looking for ingredients for poisoning. Is it that interesting?
You know, great question. I would say, again, having like read and, I had to look at it and see what was going on. I think that I appreciated this round, the quiet moments, the times where she's in class joking around. Her friends are funny. These scenes are very funny.
Mm-hmm.
You don't remember them because you have all of these other really intense, high action sequence scenes those are the ones
Yeah.
that stick out to you. So it is one of those things where I don't want to say that maybe Yaros wasn't able to master the quiet. Maybe some scenes she didn't as well as other scenes.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's up to preference and everything.
Yeah.
But it might be a double-edged sword where the action scenes were too good. Like, it was too interesting. I think the action scenes were, like, so at stakes and so here that,
Yeah.
our adrenaline, our interest goes down when it's
Yeah.
like there isn't a dragon or a horny scene. That's I'm not focusing.
Or, risk of death.
Yeah, like,
Yeah,
if there's
yeah,
not a
yeah.
risk of dick or death, then I don't want it.
That's a t-shirt.
Dick or death. Like, I'm just imagining, like, a sword crossing with a
No, no dick, no death, no thank you.
dick or death.
I got nothing. I got
I really
nothing.
want a dick or death t-shirt. Dick or death or
Yeah,
nothing.
yeah, yeah. It's like no shirts,
Choose
no
no service.
shoes, no service.
If
Yes,
I'm reading a
same
book and
idea.
there's no dick or death, dick, death, or dragons.
Dick, death, and or dragons? I'm in.
Yeah, dick. It's like a checklist, like dick, death,
Yeah,
dragons, sold.
I'm
Yeah.
in. All right. Let me think about that.
Yeah, can you make me that shirt, please?
Yeah, I can.
Thank you.
So circling back to Terry's original part of the comment, which was the world building taking place on the parapet, which is Violet's way of focusing when
Mhm.
she has anxiety while walking the parapet. I have mixed feelings about this. I do kind of crap on it every now and then. Here's what's good about it.
Mhm.
We learn a lot about Violet when she chooses to recite facts
Yeah.
to manage her anxiety.
Yep.
That is a very telling trait for a character.
Mhm.
And that teaches us a lot about Violet in that moment. That's what's great about it. What's not great, for me at least, is how long
Mhm.
it goes on, how much information we get. Now, does it all end up being relevant? Yes, it does, even though Violet thinks it's just random
Yeah,
facts.
yeah.
So I understand the purpose of it, and I understand the dislike of having it in exposition format somewhere else because this is all stuff Violet already knows, so it's hard for her to learn it anew.
Yep, yep.
Nevertheless, there was too much of it. If it had been half the length, it would have been more palatable.
Yeah.
Like there needed to be some sort of balance,
Mhm.
and unfortunately, because it happens multiple times for too long of a period
Yeah.
of time, both times, it comes across as lazy.
You and I have talked about the getting information, the fantasy conundrum, right? How does a fantasy author get information to the reader?
Mhm.
And there are probably more than what I'm about to list, but here are three main ways. One, you list it all at the beginning. Here is
Yep.
the world, here's what's happening, here is everything that's going on. It's just kind of like it's not a cop out, but it's just kind of like okay, now you need to pay attention and now this is what I'm doing. Go look at the appendix if you need to.
Yep.
Then you also have the Rebecca Yarros way, where you have all this information that the character's reciting very early on. Now, it may not make sense for the scene, and even if it does make sense for the scene, there's a lot of info you're trying to get across, so it just kind of rambles on. And, even reading, my eyes start skipping over, right?
Yep. Yep.
And then you have the third route, which we've seen with Serpent and the Night of Wings, right? And that is and
Mm-hmm.
even with Bride, like you're getting information a little bit as the story goes. But by doing that, you risk the reader coming up with false information and then the reader kind of being like, wait, this isn't what I thought it was because
Yep.
the author withheld. it's all hard. Like, it's like there's no right answer, and it comes to
Yeah.
preference.
Yep.
Rebecca chose a route, and it's a route that people liked or didn't like. I
Yeah.
didn't. I was good to a point, and then my eyes glazed over because I just wasn't
Yeah.
able to focus on that. Other people really, really enjoyed it, and other people absolutely hated it. But it's one of the avenues.
I'm happy you brought it up because it is a preference thing. It's a preference from like an author
Yeah.
perspective doing the writing, and it's a preference thing from a reader perspective
Mhm.
and how they like to absorb information. And it might vary depending on the story and depending on the author
Mhm.
what the reader finds palatable.
Yeah.
I'm halfway palating it. I'm halfway there, but I'm not convinced.
Yeah.
But I just as equally like to absorb information when it's told in dialogue between
Mhm.
characters. So to each their own.
One way that I will say that I absolutely loved getting information were the different snippets at the beginning of each chapter, and getting them
Mm-hmm.
from different
Mm-hmm.
correspondents, getting them from different parts of books in the Book of Brennan and
Yep.
stuff. Even
Yep.
the entire book starts off with, "This is told by," who was it? Everyone's Jessica to me. It's
What does that say about
I
you?
don't know. But you know who I'm talking about?
It's is it Markham,
No.
the
No,
instructor?
because it's the book in the beginning of the book. All of Iron Flame is told by
Not Iron Flame, Fourth
Fourth Wing,
Wing.
and Iron Flame. All of it is told by her friend who's a scribe.
Is it? I
Uh-huh.
thought it was her instructor who was the scribe.
Nope. The following text has been faithfully translated from Navarian into the modern language by Jessina,
Oh,
curator of the Scribe Quadrant, I can't tell,
quadrant.
Quadrant, thank you, at Basgareth War College. All events are true, and names have been preserved to honor the courage of those fallen. May their souls be condemned to Malak.
That I forgot. I think that the little snippets at the start of each chapter is extremely well done
Mhm.
because you get unique voices throughout.
Yeah.
You get a ton of world building with little effort
Oh, yeah.
and without bogging the reader down. Everything that's told at the start of a chapter is relevant to that chapter.
And even, like, relevant for, like, pages on and books to come, because I think it's in the
Mhm.
second book where, one of the correspondence comes from Violet's mom, but when she was before she was a general, and you have to
Yep.
really pay attention to it, and that is like
Yeah.
that's some little tiny detail stuff I love.
Yeah. I do too. I've always wanted to do that in a book and I've never figured out the right way,
Mhm.
and so I love to see it when it's done well.
Yeah.
And I do think Yaros does it extremely well, and I think that's also why people love the world building in this book.
Yeah.
It's not just because of the dragons. It's not just because it's at a military school. It's because
It's rich.
it is very, very, very rich.
Yeah. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. There's just so much there. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's not all strictly through Violet's
Yeah.
perspective, right? Because when the story is told only through Violet's perspective, she becomes an unreliable narrator.
Mhm.
But when we're getting pieces of firsthand accounts, primary sources, secondary sources that aren't being filtered through Violet's point of
Yeah.
view, we're getting a fresher perspective of the world that we can really truly
Yeah.
trust,
Yeah.
that we can't necessarily trust if it was all coming strictly through Violet.
Yeah. And the world building is very rich and thought out. It is.
Mhm.
There's a magic system. There's, and that's hard to get. That's hard to come by in
Yeah.
in fantasy too nowadays. Sometimes it's just kind of like magic, and it is
Yeah.
what it is. Like,
Yeah.
even SJM kind of falls under that, where it's like magic, and
Yeah.
here we at least have, okay, they can come up with mage lights on their own. They can open close doors. They can do quill pens. Like,
Mhm.
everyone has a basic magic. And then you have what they're able to do versus what their dragon channels. And then if the magic comes from the dragon, which is from the
Yep.
tattoo. Like, I don't think people realize, like, you don't get that in books nowadays a lot of times with, like,
No.
here's a
It's
fantasy, here's the magic system.
so true. It's so true.
Is it complicated? No, but is it something? Yeah. Yeah, it is.
Yeah. Yeah.
And this is the first time out of the books we've talked about this for this summer book club that has a laid out magic system. And I'm including you, Serpent in the Wings of Night. Like,
Yeah, that's fair.
you know, like there's no system that's like, hey, here's
Yep.
how this is how people get their power.
Yep.
Granted, this is one that requires more explanation. So, you know, and then you have the politics. Oh my God, I love a book that has like politics, and you know, I love it and hate it because I have to pay attention. And
Yeah.
now it's like a history lesson. I'm like, oh crap, now I have to go to the beginning and see who did what, and you know, what happened 800 years ago, 600 years ago versus 50 years ago. So, you know, there's a lot, but at the same time, when you do that, there is a clear history. There is what has happened in this world. And that's what makes it feel so unique when you step into it, knowing that there's already a history that's been thought of.
Yeah, I agree. Yaros is juggling a lot
Mhm.
between the politics, the magic, the, you know, relationships among the
Mhm.
students, the education,
Yeah.
all the lying.
I know.
Like, there's a lot. There's a lot going
And
on.
then clues for the book to come. Like there's
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
lot happening, and I'm very curious to talk. I wish I could talk to the editor of this book. Like I want to know.
Mhm.
I mean, I also would be shocked if there weren't more than one editors involved in this one.
Yeah.
And I don't just
Yeah.
mean in the like, you know, check spelling and grammar kind of editing, but just more of like, hey, you said this over here, that goes against what you said over here, because there's a lot that you have to pay attention to. And
Yeah.
I do appreciate this about her.
Yeah. I do too.
Yeah.
I do too.
This is making me give Iron Flame willing to give it a second chance, as if I'm not going to read it again. I'm going to read it again before the next book comes out.
Yeah. I am more prepared now than I was before to give Iron Flame a second chance.
Yeah, now I'm not. I don't feel. It's going to make me mad again.
Well, wait till after book club is done.
I'm going to rage all over. Thank you for listening to part 1 of this week's episode of Book Talk for Book Talk. Stick around for part 2, which airs on Thursday.
We encourage you to rate and subscribe to our show on your preferred podcast listening platform. We would love to hear your thoughts based on today's conversation. If you would like to submit your take on any of the books we plan to discuss later this summer, please be sure to follow us on Instagram, where we ask for listener submissions.
If you're enjoying the podcast, please visit our website, booktalkforbooktalk.com, to view our latest merch and learn about supporting the show through Patreon, Ko-Fi, or Venmo. You can also follow us on TikTok or Instagram at the handle booktalkforbooktalk.
Bye!
I love the blooper, though. The Monday blooper reels are funny.
Oh, good. Today's, I forgot to post it yesterday, so I posted it today. Have you watched it? It's
Yeah, I watched it.
Do we have an audience member?
You know what you could do for Patreon is have these like early chats on there.
Oh. Yeah. Just like our like warm-ups.
Just it's our mouth warm up where
I
think that's
no one wants to see that shit.
No, and yet they're going to, because that's all we have to offer right now.
Fall has officially started here in Los Angeles, and that means we finally get to do fall activities.
I have been counting down the days for when I can go to pumpkin patches, maybe even hit up an apple orchard, and I get to do all of it looking super cute in my Quince boyfriend sweater.
This weather is perfect for my dark academia vibes, and I'm so excited to bust out my washable silk blouse because you know I'm going to be taking pictures.
Quince is known for their Mongolian cashmere sweaters from $50. And that's not all. Quince has so many other amazing things on their website.
All of those items are priced 50 to 80% less than similar brands.
That includes leather jackets, cotton cardigans, soft denim. Like my entire fall wardrobe is genuinely turning into Quince wardrobe.
By partnering directly with top factories and cutting out the cost of the middleman, we get savings as the customer.
One of my favorite parts about Quince is the fact that they only work with factories that use safe, ethical, and responsible manufacturing practices.
and they still manage to get premium fabrics and finishes for that, luxury feeling for every item that they have.
Get cozy in Quince's high-quality wardrobe essentials. Go to quince.com/booktalk for free shipping on your order and 365-day returns. That's Quince, QUINCE.com/booktalk, BOOKTALK, to get free shipping and 365-day returns. That's quince.com/booktalk.